okay.
This
I
is
need to find something that doesn't put me to sleep.
you want relief, but you don't want to go to sleep. And so
No.
we're right. I see a number of people popping on. So we're going to go ahead and get started because we're almost at 5 after, and we know that people will continue to join us. So we would just like to again welcome you officially to our 3rd session. Can you imagine? My name is Joanna Greer McEachin. To those of you all have not been here yet, because we know we will get some new people on today as well. And I'm the executive director for the Asheville Buncombe Institute of Parity Achievement. And so we're partnering with AARP on this miraculous, I would like to say awesome opportunity to do a book club in a different way. And I really feel like this is the personification of actively aging through activism and art all at the same time, with us featuring Anne and her book. And this is something too, when you think about a book club, most of the time you're discussing the book without the author. But now we're privileged to have the author on board so that she can give us more insight to her thoughts and her findings from her voice, audibly, almost like an audible session, in person in real time. And so again, I'm just really excited to be a part of the conversation. Also letting you all know that we will be recording, but just the part of the session when Anne is presenting, so that we can make sure that people that aren't able to join don't totally miss out. But we will like to let you know that when we go into discussion, we will cease recording, because we do want to make sure that this is a safe place to share, that is without any judgment and any preconceived ideas. And so we really encourage everyone to share accordingly, whether it be through your voice or through the chat. If you don't feel comfortable speaking and you would prefer to utilize the chat, we will read those questions out and get Anne's feedback and or your input. And so we're just really excited to talk about white privilege today. But before we go into what we're going to talk about, I also would like to remind you all that as you come on, to introduce yourselves. And then we would love for you to share something that you have taken away so far from the sessions that you have been a part of. And if this is your first session today, let us know what you are looking forward to or anticipating learning and or sharing today. And with that, I am going to pass it on to our friends of AARP.
I'm Dan Azar.
And I'm Sherry Lucas.
And we are both AARP volunteers. Towards the pursuit of personal empowerment, supported by AARP in partnership with ABIPA, we are grabbing the challenge of being the change we wish to see in the world, to make a difference. Today, we're fortunate to continue our journey together, listening and learning and growing our understanding about the Appalachian heritage and culture of African-American people in Western North Carolina.
Thanks, Dana. And I'm thrilled to be able to be the one to introduce Anne. Before we get started, though, I just want to put a plug in for AARP of Western North Carolina. If you'd like to learn more about our organization, we've got a great website that I'll put in the chat. If you like this event, there's many other events that may be of interest to you too, and they're all on the website, along with information about volunteering. We're always looking for volunteers, and if you feel compelled, we would love to talk to you about that. So I'll just put that information in the chat, and without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Anne Woodford to get us kicked off today. Thanks, Anne.
Thank you so much. And I'd be very anxious to hear what people think about what we've talked about so far, and what you think you're going to learn today, or what you feel about the words white privilege. I think that's an important thing for all of us. I need to have that information from you so that I can understand what I need to explain and what we need to talk about all along. I'll just move right into the information that I have to offer today. There was a little old lady. She was fun on some Clint Eastwood films back in, a good long time ago. Her name was Ruth Gordon. And she said one time, never face the facts. I had that up over my computer and on my desk for many, many years, because she said, if you face the facts, you may not do anything. because around you, there's so many things going on that it would be very difficult if you stopped and thought before you moved. But I say we need to be deliberate about what we're doing. In the port of Charleston, North Carolina, it was the largest slave port in the United States. And most enslaved people passed through that city, and they had a slave mart there. There were two women, Angelina and Sarah Grimke, two sisters, white women, whose parents.
I kind of know, but what's your question?
If I could just, there's someone that sounds like they may not be muted. If you don't mind, if you would mute yourself, that'd be great. We'd much appreciate that. Thank you.
Their family was a prominent family that owned slaves, and they grew up there, and they watched the unjust treatment of the slaves, and they also understood that women were treated in a very bad manner. But thank goodness their brother, one of their brothers, or maybe both, decided that they would teach them how to read and introduce them to education that they may not have had if they'd relied on their parents. So they grew up, and they had watched all this injustice over the years with the slaves and with women. And they became the first women to speak in front of a state legislature as representatives of the American Anti-Slavery Society. Their names were, again, for you to read about, Angelina and Sarah Grimke, Grimke. Those people, you should really know about women like that, how powerful they were and how they used their white privilege. They became really dynamic writers and speakers for women's rights. And their ideas were so far ahead of time that people burned their writings, and angry groups of people came to their speeches. And yet they stayed with their beliefs and their stories that you would not believe if you go ahead and study what they did. White privilege, they had it. Their father was a judge, but they used it for the good for us. It might have hurt them, but it really made all of us in this time, in this day and age, it brought us to the point we are now, which is not there yet. That's why we need people to step up and be deliberate in their actions. President Obama gave the Medal of Honor to John Glenn. And I think about John Glenn, how he used his privilege, because he was an astronaut. We know him as an astronaut, but he was also the senator of Ohio when I started a small business there. I started a business I named after my parents. Purell was my dad's name and Mama Margaret Ann. So I named my business Purell Ann Incorporated. And it was one of the first 3 African-American oriented greeting card businesses. I went down to Indianapolis. I had an appointment and I called it ahead to confirm it, to sell to the Army Air Force Exchange Service, after I became very confident that my products would be good to sell in the exchange services across the country. When I arrived down in Indianapolis, there was nobody there to see me, even though I had already confirmed my appointment. I came back very discouraged, but someone said, call Senator Glenn. I did that, and I've always believed that I actually spoke with him on the phone in his office. And he said, this won't happen. This is not going to happen. So within 2 weeks after that, I had an order from the Army Air Force Exchange Service for my products. And so when I watched him, the actor acting as John Glenn in Hidden Figures, I believed it. Because he stood up, he showed respect to those computers, those human computers that were standing over to the side, the Black group of women. And I thought to myself, this was real. This wasn't just a dramatic thing that they placed there for dramatic purposes. I really believe that every one of us has a great opportunity to make a difference in this world. when I was in school, I went to a little school called the Andrews Colored Negro School from 1st to 8th grade. For the first 4 years, it was Andrews Colored School, run by the town of Andrews. It was in the Cherokee County school system, elementary school. Then the last 4 years were called Andrews Negro School, because that's what the name was put on us at that time. And so there was, when you thought about it, it was a rough situation to go to a little school like that. But I always remember this little story. This is an aside from what I was going to say, but my dad had to build the fires there. He didn't have a truck or a vehicle at that time. And we had snows in wintertime, real snows. We could have up to 6 inches of snow on the ground sometimes. Daddy would walk over to the school, build a fire for us so that we would be warm when we went to school. And we didn't take breaks just because there was snow on the ground back in those days. Daddy's big footprints were in the snow going over to the school building. And when we went, we had little brown high top shoes we wore. We'd step in his footsteps. I know that I'm proud and I'm very pleased that I had my daddy's footsteps to walk in. He was one of the people in our community who brought down a lot of these barriers between races. And it makes me feel very proud that I had his footsteps. In the school system, there was Plessy versus Ferguson Supreme Court decision back in 1896 that sponsored the state, engaged the state was allowed to have segregation by that law. But in 1954, there was the Brown versus the Board of Education of Topeka, Kansas decision by the Supreme Court that overturned the old one. We did not get our school was not integrated until 1965. If we needed supplies, we had to walk about a mile over to the white school to pick up our supplies. And that might be paper, pens, colored crayons, books, anything. So the 7th and 8th graders were allowed to walk over to the school to pick up our supplies. And there were two ladies over there that I'm always proud to know that they were there, white women who greeted us with respect, made sure that we had everything we needed to take back to our little school. And one of them was Ardith Hay, who later became a person whose daughter was in college. She was a tailor, and she would have to sew a whole new wardrobe for her daughter every year, the one that was in college. And she didn't finish some of them, so she gave them to me. And I used my grandmother's treadle sewing machine to finish up those. And those were the clothes that I wore to Allen High School when I graduated from the 8th grade in Andrews. And they were very well made. She had the parts cut out, would be nice wools with interfacing and lining and all of those things. And I had no idea what I had. But this lady used her white privilege in that school to make a difference for this one little child, Ann Woodford, Ann Miller at that time. Also, Judy Brooks, who lived in Andrews, was a young woman who had just started working over at that school. And she was the same way. She treated me, all of us students, as we went over there. Everybody, all the Black people cared for her and felt respected when they were in her presence. Later on, she's the person who told me, you should go over and apply for the Chamber of Commerce position, director of the chamber. And I was like, oh, you must be kidding. And I laughed in her face. And she said, don't laugh. You're as good as anybody else over there. She used her white privilege to step up and say, and get over there and apply for that job. I did. I got that job. And later, some people came along using their white privilege for the wrong and decided that they needed to let me go, even though I had helped to build the community, bring down those walls that I always talk about, and build bridges. And so many white people in the community would come over and work with me in the Chamber of Commerce. But some came along that decided in the evening when Judy wasn't there to vote to let me go. And so I needed a job after that. What did Judy do? She said, there's an opening at the county planning for the county planner position in Cherokee County. Go down there and apply. And I was like, I don't have a background for planning. She said, you can do it. I know you can. And you're qualified. Please go down there and apply. So I did. And they also, the 3 commissioners unanimously voted to take me in as their county planner. And I'm very pleased to know of the work that I was able to accomplish while I was there. Allen High School, I'll get back to that. Allen High School was the one place where young women, young girls, 14, 15-year-old girls that graduated from their little elementary schools could go to learn to have a stronger education. 8th grade was the end of education in Andrews. And in Murphy, it went to the 10th grade. So that meant that they did not want us to learn to have a diploma in Cherokee County at that time. And so we found out that through my grandparents had sent their 2 daughters, youngest daughters, to Allen High School, that would be the place for me to go. So I went to Allen High School, but there were about half and half of the staff were Black and white. But the more the teachers and the people, of course, in power were the white ones. And so the principal of the school, Miss Julia Titus, noticed my artwork. And she said, I found a place downtown where you can get some more training. So she paid for a class for me, 2 classes for me to go downtown. And her friend, who was Miss Litchfield, was the librarian and English teacher, drove me to the classes every week. And they used their white privilege. I want people to hear what I'm saying. You have white privilege, use it for the good, whatever stage of life it's in. And that was back there in the 60s. And the Grimke sisters were back there in the 1800s using their white privilege. We're now here needing you, if you're white, to use that white privilege to do some good, to bring down barriers between the races, to build bridges that will make a difference for justice in this country. So that was my first chance to get some formal training. And I think you heard me talk about my initial training on television in another session. What is white privilege? Well, let's see what's privilege first. I looked in the Cambridge Academic Content Dictionary, and it says it's a noun that grants a special advantage or authority to a particular person or group. That ends up being white people. So what is white privilege? Or even white skin privilege? It's a societal privilege that benefits white people over non-white people in some societies, particularly if they're otherwise under the same social, political, or economic circumstances. There's a woman who was writing for the Huffington Post that said privilege was, she said, there are many types of privilege: economic privilege, gender privilege, heterosexual privilege, and of course, racial privilege. White privilege is simply an interchangeable term for racial privilege and refers only to race, not to other privileges a person may have been born into. I was really blessed to be able to go into a session with the wonderful Peggy McIntosh, who was Dr. McIntosh, who used her white privilege to define and highlight this subject that is so sensitive. In 1988, she wrote an article, White Privilege and Male Privilege, a personal account of coming to see correspondences through work in women's studies. White Privilege, Unpacking the Invisible Knapsack, 1989. For those who want to follow up and learn more, please go to that. White Privilege, Unpacking the Invisible Knapsack. So I was so happy to be able to be in a class with that lady because she was so bold as a white woman back there in the early 90s to speak up. And this is what we all have to do, learn to speak up and speak out about what we believe is right. So who has privilege? I have privilege. My privilege happens to be my education and the respect that my grandparents and my parents and my sisters built in this region. That's a privilege. So you have it. Each one of you has privilege. You have to stop and think about where your privilege is and how you can use it. And especially when it's white people who are in charge of this nation, you need to reach out and understand that you have that privilege. And what can you do with it? Your pastor has it if you go to church. Your political leaders have privilege. Your parents, if you're a little kid, they have the privilege over you. A judge in the courtroom has privilege. So who else? You can use an example of Tim Tebow, who could get down on his knees and profess his faith at a football game. And yet when Colin Kaepernick gets down on his knees and the people who follow him get on their knees for justice, they're really put down. Colin has still not been able to be accepted as the football player that he could have been. So you can have privilege because of your race, your gender, sexual orientation, ability, religion, wealth, class, and there are other characteristics. As a white man, you could enjoy privileges more than a white woman. A king, queen, or president has privileges that people take as rights. So you can know that if you care about humanity, you can dismantle inequality, injustice, intolerance, and racism. If you will not pretend that you don't have white privilege. Your own view of white privilege is based a lot of times in your background. A lot of times people say, well, I have a friend, and it's an example, who said, well, I don't have white privilege. I could look through the cracks in the floor and see the chickens eating under my house. That's not what it's about. It's about skin color and the privileges that other people give you because of your color. Not necessarily what you think of yourself, but it's very, very important that you realize that you have this white privilege. To deny it is futile. You have it, so just use it. So what can you do to make a difference? I say stop and remember that it's not about you personally. It is a system that is there. Use it or lose it is what I say. Because right now we can do things that will help bring down these racial barriers. But we have to realize that they predicted that in 2040, white people will no longer be the majority of the people. So don't you think it makes a lot of sense to try to make peace with all the other races, all the other people of color now in this next 19 years or so? I think so. So take advantage of the fact that you have it and use it in the right way, please. Don't be afraid. Most likely, you're not going to have the suffering that the Grimke sisters had. I say sing a new song. Learn to sing with each other. Go to Black churches or Black organizations and sing with the people there. And they've been singing your songs all these years, so why not? It's my belief that singing together, you cannot sing together and look at each other with hatred. That's all there is to it. Be deliberate in your anti-racist stance. If you are anti-racist, choose to try to understand each other. Sometimes it'll be difficult, but you can still make that choice to try, at least make that effort. And then just pledge to stand today, make a decision today. Don't wait. Today is the first day. Love one another, because love never fails if you really love each other. I gave you some readings, and I'm really hoping that I will hear from some of you about the reading in my book, When All God's Children Get Together, a celebration of the lives and music of African American people in far western North Carolina. I just want you to understand white privilege and how to use it, and know that I have privilege. I'll say it again. I have privilege, and each one of you has privilege. People in my community have been fantastic in using their white privilege to help me, my family, other Black children that grew up in the schools, and you can do that same thing as well. Just look around you. One of the poets, Jackson Wheeler, was a man who lived, he passed away, but he was a man who lived in Andrews, and he left here because of many things that happened to him and to his family that were not very good. But he went to California, he stayed out there, and oh my goodness, that man sent me Afrocentric cards and letters and clothing, little hats to wear, all kinds of things from California, where it was easy to find those things that you couldn't find in Andrews. So once he wrote a poem that he called "For My Friend Who Rhymes with Can." He said, "Though it's been years since I believed with that utter childlike faith, I believe in you, friend. I believe that every day, in every way, you work to make things better and better. If the world is saved, it will be saved by the likes of you." And I'm telling you that it will be saved by the likes of you who cared to come on to this book club now, and a couple times ago, I think it's been like 4 weeks ago or so, that you started, and you're still with us now. So I am very grateful, and I want you to use those words for yourself. So people have been kind here, but I won't say, and I've mentioned it before, I will not say that there's been no prejudice here. There is. There are unjust things that are happening to people even right now. But I believe that in this community, in Cherokee County, it's good. And I'll kind of reiterate that my grandfather was in the ethnic cleansing in Cumming, Georgia, back in 1912. And when he came up to Andrews, he was basically forced to bring products down from the railroad down in Blue Ridge up into Cherokee County. But he said, as he noticed, he looked around, the people in Cherokee County were much kinder, and he was shocked. But he finally got up the nerve to ask somebody, a white man, at a time when it was against the law for white people to sell land to Black people. He asked this white man, did he know anything about some land? And the man said, yeah, I've got a piece up here in Andrews. Took Grandpa up there, and Grandpa bought a piece of land and built his mother a house up there, which was to bring her up from Blue Ridge into Andrews. And he built her house, and they stayed there until he joined World War I. And when he came back, she had fallen in love with a man in Andrews. And so she wanted to move out. So Grandpa went out to Swain County and met Grandma, and they got married and had their 8 children in Andrews. And Grandpa's cousin came up from Georgia also, and he named the Black community Happy Top. It just makes me feel wonderful to know that I lived in a place called Happy Top, and that's where I am now, in my studio where I do my artwork. There were a lot of bad things that happened to us growing up. We always worried if we heard about a crime, we'd say, oh, I hope it wasn't a Black man. Well, that happens now with Latinx people as well. They say the same thing. Well, I hope it wasn't a Mexican man or a Guatemalan man or somebody from South America, because that, in this country, one person, they look at one and they put that on the whole race. Even the churches back when I was growing up did things that were just horrible to us. They taught people about what they call the curse of Ham, and that showed that they were ignorant, because those preachers that preached that were ignorant, because Ham was not cursed by his father. His son was cursed. And so you have to read, and I'm proud of people that are in a book club who are reading and learning and passing on what they learn to other people. They even preached in the churches that we had tails. Black people had tails. And my dad said that he worked on the dam, the Chateau Dam over in Hayesville. And there was a Black man there who had been away in Germany in the service. And some of his white friends took him to over to a German lady's house. And when they walked in and she offered him a chair, she had him wait a minute till she could put pillows all in the chair. And he wanted to know why was she putting pillows in his chair, not in his white friend's chair? And she said, well, I didn't want you to hurt your tail. And the guys just fell out laughing because they had told this German woman that Black people had tails. So you have a wonderful opportunity to change the way people are looked at. There's no way we can change our color. We're not going to be able to do that, and we don't want to. I like my color. And so what I'd like you to understand is that you need to talk with your friends and family. It needs to be white people who talk with white people. We can do all we can right now I can do what I can to talk about it and try to help people understand, but it's up to white people to teach white people. When you're at the Thanksgiving table or Easter table or whatever it is, and you hear someone of your family making a Black joke or doing some kind of mockery of African American people, it's totally up to you to be able to change that. And you might not change that one person, but there could be somebody else at the table who might have chuckled. And then when you straightened it out, they thought. So thinking is one of the most important things. So I believe I live in a community of loving people, white people, and we are all trying to work together to make this a better place. I have many, many stories I could tell, but I want to stop so that you have an opportunity to ask your questions, and I'll do my best to answer them. Thank you all so much for being here. I really appreciate it. And thank you, AARP. Thank you. Is it Sherry? Sherry, yeah. Thank you all for being there to help bring this to the people who are willing to be on this call today.
Yes. Well, thank you again. And we can't say enough how grateful we are that